The hope is that today you get actionable material that will have a positive impact on your business, your career, your firm. Potential clients aren't necessarily looking to be wowed by your legal knowledge, at least not right away. Many just want to be understood. So a few rules. Don't assume that they can't afford you. Don't prematurely offer payment plans. You aren't selling filing a motion or a brief, reviewing contracts. You are selling fix it, make it go away, take care of it. What that really is security, confidence, trust, safety.
Welcome and thank you all for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Nina and I'll be the moderator for today. Now to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker today, Adam Boyd. Adam Boyd is the principal of the Northwood Group, a sales consultancy for law firms. He has 16 years of experience working with founders and owners on growing their businesses, seeing more than a dozen go on to exits. He's twice worked as a middle market executive, leading sales and marketing teams of different industries, one of which ended in a successful acquisition. He has an MBA from the Acton School of Business and a BA from Rhodes College. Now, the webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and once the presentation is complete, Adam will be taking audience questions. So if you have any questions that come up for him while you're watching this presentation, please feel free to submit them through that Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen. Now, without further ado, here is Adam to discuss converting leads to clients, navigating the critical moments in legal consultations.
Thank you, Nina. And I want to thank everyone at Justia for having me. I am going to do my best to not make you look bad. And I know that some of you will be watching this long after this webinar goes live. But for those of you who are, happy to answer questions. So it says a lot that you would invest time in yourself and your firm today to go through this webinar and to learn more about growing your firm. At the end of today's session, we will have Q&A, so save your questions for then. But as I will probably be talked out from an hour of talking, keep them easy. This is really about the consult. Some of you may have questions on intake. Some of this will touch on that, but save some of the intake questions specifically for the Q&A. The goal is to help you with this, win more of the right clients. In effect, we're talking about, wait for it, sales. Even if that's a 4-letter word for you as an attorney, okay? So what we're going to do today is we're going to cover best practices that align with how potential clients feel and think. And I'm going to tell you that feelings do matter in the consult. We want to give you consults that save you time, even when it feels like they take more time, and that enable you to get decisions more efficiently and effectively from potential clients. We also want to make discussing money and fees a little more easy and natural. So what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about why the consult is so important after the marketing effort that you've spent a lot of time and money on. But where we're going to go is from there, we're going to look at common mistakes I see in consults, a framework and structure that you can use for your consult, and then some basic best practices around communication that probably aren't taught in law school. Okay. Okay. Now, a lot of what we're covering is going to be based on research, behavioral economics, neuro-linguistic programming, if you're familiar with that, and some psychology. All of the books you see here are things that I've read that have influenced my work with clients, and they're readily available to all of you. But let's talk about what this isn't. What we're going to do today is not jump into an attempt to win all clients at all costs. This is not about making money over serving clients the right way. It's not about doing whatever it takes. It's not about taking on any and all clients. It's not about making guarantees. It's not about pulling bait and switches. It's nothing sleazy or pushy. I don't want to do any of that. I know you don't. I will challenge your assumptions on how you think about working with clients in the consult phase. Now, you probably want to know a little more about me than that I somehow got through college and that a business school let me in. If you look me up, you'll find out I am not an attorney. I did, however, take some practice LSAT in my 20s. And when I got to the logic games, I realized Harvard Law was not in my future. So I chose business school instead and did fairly well on the GMAT. Let that tell you what it is. I've been a management consultant for 17 years with a focus on business development, customer acquisition, and sales. Over the last couple of years, I've really been working on helping law firms grow. I focus on how they win business, specifically in the consult and sometimes in intake. My background does include an MBA where I had to sell cookbooks door to door. And since then, I've cold called on CEOs. I've run the networking circuit. I've spent my own money in marketing, run thousands of sales calls in various industries, and work in multiple industries. So the material we're covering today, I really learned as a consultant to businesses in the first 10 years of my career and have been honing ever since. But during that time of my career, working with companies, here's some of the things that we saw. And I'm going to tell you, none of it was rocket science. One company went from 6 to 100 million in annual revenue. Another one in the world of finance was putting out $20 million in funds, and they quadrupled that. A professional services business was able to quadruple their pricing. Several companies had profitable exits. I've trained over 1,500 people and worked with hundreds of executives in 80 companies. So I tell you that you know that this stuff has been battle tested. And one of the things that I've learned along the way is that the people who win clients or win the business aren't always the best ones to do it. They're just the one who does the best job selling. And I know for many of you, you take a lot of pride in the quality of work you do. You take pride in your prep. You take pride in your education. You take pride in the way you service. This is the skill set that's going to be really important to winning the right clients so that they can get that opportunity to work with you. The hope is that today you get actionable material that will have a positive impact on your business, your career, your firm. So let's talk about why the consult itself matters. 57% of potential clients are getting to attorneys today via an online search, meaning they didn't come to you via word of mouth or referral, meaning somebody didn't walk them in and say, you need to hire this person. They saw something that caused them to pick up the phone or book online. That's great. Maybe it's where you are in the local service ads. Maybe it's the fact that you sponsored something. But when they get to you, they need to see it for themselves. What's more, depending on what data you look at, there are over 1.3 million attorneys in the United States, meaning it's incredibly competitive out there. There are a lot of attorneys, and there are a lot more than likely in your practice area in the market you serve. So growing your firm isn't just about leads, though you need leads to have a firm, and I recommend you connect with Justia on what they can do for you. You're being told to spend a lot of money on marketing, somewhere between 2 and 20% of your revenue, depending on what resource you're talking to. And everywhere I look, somebody is trying to sell you on this. I'm on LinkedIn and I see all the people in the world of marketing going to law firms and trying to generate leads, do marketing for you. They want you to spend more, and the people who promote that are really good at it. And it might be that they want to do it through ads. It could be billboards. It could be television, radio. I don't know if anybody spends money on TV anymore. In my market, they do. It could be SEO, pay-per-click, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook with their targeting mechanisms. But we need to think about 2 to 20%. What does that mean? And I want to couch this in very real numbers. You know, if you're a $500,000 firm, it's anywhere between, if we go to the 18% range, $10,000 and $90,000 on marketing. If you're $1 million firm, it's $20,000 to $180,000. And those are broad ranges, but we start talking about some real money here. If you're a $3 million firm, it's $60,000 to $540,000. And if you're a $7.5 million firm, you might be spending $1.35 million on marketing. Okay, so what's that worth? If you're a $500,000 firm, maybe it's a much needed vacation. Maybe it's a better paralegal, or it's the ability to pay off some loans and get some breathing room. Let's say you're that $1 million firm. Maybe it's a better vacation, right? Maybe you stay for more than 3 days. Maybe you do some work on your yard because you've taken some profits out of the firm. Maybe it's a new attorney who's actually really good at what they do, right? Because I've worked with firms where they hire somebody and they realize that person doesn't work very well. Maybe it's another paralegal and multiple attorneys if you're a bigger firm. Maybe you're a much larger firm and you're saying, you know what? I want to start to diversify what we've got, and I'd like to buy the building we're in and start collecting check on that rather than just billable time. So when people talk to you about your firm, very often what they talk about is one thing. And this triangle we're going to come back to a few times, and I'll explain what it means. They'll talk to you about T, which is traffic or leads. And that's really good. You need leads. If you don't have them, you can't run the consult. And if you aren't getting many consults, you just take whatever you can get, even if it's not a good fit client. So you have to have them. And you can get them many ways: search engine optimization, pay-per-click or search engine marketing, referrals, leads companies, as I mentioned, radio, TV, billboards. Amazingly, TikTok has become a source of leads for some attorneys. Facebook, I see a lot of people investing in copywriters on LinkedIn, and you need the traffic. But if we come back to the triangle, we need to see that T is for traffic, but C is for conversion or closing. And that's where we take the traffic and we actually turn it into a client. E, which we don't have time for today, is about economics, what you pay for that traffic. It's here's how much it cost us to acquire a new client. Here's what we charged, and here's what it cost us to serve them. And after the serving and the cost to acquire them, you should have some money left over. We don't have time for that today to talk about that, but it's something to think about, and there are experts on pricing out there. I believe that leads don't matter if you're not converting them. The marketing focus of your firm is going to say, hey, we got to get leads. And that's great, but it means more if you don't get enough. Sorry, I'm going up. Hit the wrong button. Traffic is only part of your triangle. Okay. More traffic means more consults, which in your world are actually more expensive than the money. Because it's not just your cash, it's your time. And if you're spending a lot of time in consults because you're driving more leads, because you're not converting enough, you're not with clients enough, you're not educating yourself enough, you're not breathing, you're not getting rest, you're not developing other people in your firm. So we need to think traffic's good, but we've got to convert. So I like to think about this as a math problem. And I want to use this as an example. It's putting you $1 million firm and your average case size is $5,000. You're doing 200 cases a year. And let's say you're spending $50,000 a year to drive leads. You're converting 1 in 5, depending on your practice area, how long you've been around. These numbers vary. And let's say you're getting 1,000 leads a year. Well, if you can convert a little bit better, right? Your spend stays the same, the leads stay the same, the client value stays the same. But if we can convert instead of 20% to 30%, which isn't a massive difference, we win 100 new clients. And if we keep the case size the same, it's an additional $500,000 a year in revenue. Now, you probably, as you bump up, unless you've got a lot of capacity, you're probably going to have to hire some people to help you. So your fixed costs may go up, but look what it does to your pre-tax profit, because you do need to run a firm. And the more money you make, the more you can invest in a firm, the better you can serve clients, and the better your quality of life. Now, if we get good at converting, one of the things we can do is you can raise prices. And I'm going to tell a story about that in a minute. Look what happens here. You don't need to create any more spend, and you don't have to increase your fixed costs. It just all falls to the bottom line incrementally after taxes. So what could you potentially be doing with that incremental money on a case by case or client basis, right? If you can bump prices by 10 or 15% while you're converting more, you've got more to invest in firm and the growth of it, which creates a healthier firm, a more enduring firm, better experience for clients, better work, better attorneys, better staff. So today we're not focusing on traffic. We're going to focus on the conversion. Okay. That's all I'm going to be talking about. The intake and the consult, mostly the consult. Save your intake questions for later. Okay. Now, a little background to frame what we're doing here today. I began using this material with a BCG trained consultant, an outsourced CFO, bookkeeping firm. One used it to increase pricing. One of them used it to start converting a lot more business. He actually called me, don't get upset with me on this, to say, hey, I'm selling too many I'm selling too many clients now. And sometimes they're not the ones I want. So we had to work with him a little bit on his criteria there. But these are smart, honest professionals who realize that the conversion portion of their business needed work. One of those clients referred me to the owner of what I would call kind of like a mid-small law firm a couple years ago. And I got on the phone with the owner of this firm, and he said, hey, if I can increase my close rate by 10%, I can double my cash flow. He'd been working hard to keep all his people employed through COVID. He hadn't let anybody go, even to his own cost. He was spending his money to keep everybody running. And then they started to come out of it in COVID, but they needed to fix some things. Before we'd ever met, he'd done the following. He dialed in his marketing. He's a really, really sharp guy. He'd spent years improving it, working on his own. He knew how to capture information, how to follow up. He tracked all the key metrics, from volume to call response rates to meetings booked to closed. We can tell you right now which of his intake personnel have the highest show rate for meetings. We can tell you which of his intake personnel have the best downstream close rate. They actually have an impact on whether or not those people, when they meet with attorneys, close. He had crafted scripts for his team to use, worked on them, tried training the team himself, but he knew it still needed work to move the needle on close rate. So I'd worked with a lot of service providers before, but not law firms. Going to be straight with you folks. Told him I'd give it a shot. I reviewed consults from his attorney across several practice areas: bankruptcy, family law, state law, probate, criminal, employment law. And I identified a handful of things that if we simply stopped doing would have a significant impact. I'm going to tell you, it was uncomfortable for them. They didn't like working with a non-attorney at first, and they were skeptical. They prided themselves on their intellect, their understanding of the law, and it took weeks for me to win their trust. But we did. And the process and the principles we covered today, that's what they worked on. They began trying to implement what we were doing, and over 5 months, they were able to raise pricing from $4,000 per case to $4,500, and their conversion rate went from 18% to 31%. Billings went from $210 a month to $350 a month. They weren't in a bad spot, but they really started to take off. It was all in how they ran consults. We didn't change marketing. We didn't change any of that, just how they ran consults. They could have maybe gotten a similar result by spending more on marketing, but it would have taken twice as much time and money. So they used this framework and methodology to boost these win rates. In September of 22, they opened 88 new cases, and you can see what happened in September of 23. It was 181. No increased lead flow. They also boosted their view ratings online, which drove more traffic, and their NPS scores. So really proud of them. It was an honor to work with them, and they do a great job. The material works. As that client had success, they referred me to other firms, and we saw others have success. And I'm excited to share some of that with you today. So let's talk about what we have to stop doing. Let's really dig in. Attorneys want to help clients. Most of the ones I talk to and work with, they really want to help. They're hardworking. They're really good at doing the work. They're not always sure how to convey that to a potential client other than saying, we've done a lot of cases like this, or we're really good at this. They've been taught to practice the law and to persuade with logic. But understanding ethical persuasion, especially in a client acquisition, client development context, typically new to them and uncomfortable. They want to solve problems and quickly, not sit in what they feel like could be a therapy session for the client. They don't want to deal with a ton of emotion. They want to educate on the law. But typically, it doesn't connect with that potential client. So clients leave and say things like, think about it. We'll get back to you. And the attorney says, this is what they hear. Can I call you back? You did a great job. And both sides miss out because the attorney thinks they weren't a good lead. They were a bad leads. And what I want to do is help you fix that. Right? So let's talk about some of the mistakes attorneys make in intake and consult. Charlie Munger, who recently passed, was Warren Buffett's business partner. And he said, the answer to a lot of problems is to invert. meaning we need to find out what leads to the wrong answer and just eliminate that. So here's what I have attorneys stop doing. By the way, Munger was an attorney before he became a full-time investor. There's no magic in what I'm going to share with you, just common sense, but it's not commonly practiced. It's going to sound incredibly elementary to some of you, but I want you to bear with me before we get into the structure. This is important. I've worked with a lot of people across a lot of practice areas, and I have to bring it up because I see it repeated. One of the first things is that attorneys spend too much time in the wrong areas on their consult. When we get into our structure, you'll kind of see where I push people to spend time. But when they spend time on the wrong areas, they quietly internally panic about the amount of time they have left to wrap up the consult. You all can name every single one of these people. Most of you probably know where they went to law school. But 50% of the country can't name more than one of them. Why is anyone going to care where you clerked or where you went to law school or where you started your career? Fewer than 5% of the people you talk to will have any frame of reference on that. So where do you spend time focusing on a consult? I want you to think about this because this may be your big takeaway. Is it your background? Is it the fact of the case? Is it building a relationship with somebody who may want to spend a lot of money to hire you? Is it understanding the impact on the potential client? Finding out what's important to them? Telling them their options? Understanding what they've considered and tried? Educating them on the law? Arguing with them over their do-it-yourself legal education? Routinely, when attorneys talk to me about their consult, they're worried people will talk too much or take up too much time because they have so much to do and they're billing by the hour. That makes sense. But first, we have to think about where time goes on a consult. People who are in front of you are there for a reason. They've already chosen to meet with you. They've vetted you enough to have you talk to them. It's not the time to tell them about where you clerked when they're not going to understand anything about that judge or that court. So I want you to stop. If you think about this, stop spending so much time sharing about your background. Most people don't care. And I'm going to get into how we connect a little bit. That's focused on you when your potential clients want you to talk about them and hear about them. Most people, and I'll say this again, want to be heard and understood. Psychologists will tell you that people trust you in proportion to how much you know about them, not how much they know about you, even when they're sitting down to hire you. Harvard Business Review did it. They did a survey probably 20 or 25 years ago, and they asked small business owners, what's your biggest concern when you hire an outsider to help you? And they said routinely that they won't understand my business. The consult is the time to begin listening and thus building trust. The more that you have your potential clients talking, the better off you are, assuming it's a case you want. Because if they're talking, interestingly enough, they're connecting with you. You have to create the space for that. Second, a lot of attorneys are looking at the clock because there's so much on their plate. I talk to them about it. I hear it when I review their consults. They're in a hurry. Yes, you have to bill. Yes, you have cases to get to. Yes, you have administrative tasks. Yes, you have people in the office who need your help. Yes, you have a life outside of billable hours. Also, yes, your potential clients want to feel important. The more time they receive, the more important they feel, just like children. They also, like kids, feel it if you're rushed. When attorneys rush consults, they miss things that matter. Nuances, phrases, changes in body language, tone, pitch. As a result, close rates drop. We've seen this. They miss tells in the conversation. If you play poker, you can see tells. There are tells in conversations because they're rushing. We've seen bumps in conversion rates just because attorneys added 5 or 10 minutes to the consult they ran. That may be your big takeaway today. One thing we've seen, the more consults or intake specialists run in a given day, the worse their conversion ratio. This was a research study done on, they put EKG monitors mapped into brains, and they said, what happens in days without breaks? You can see at the top, the stress build on the brain when there are no breaks between meetings. Your ability to perform is contingent upon you having space and enough time to rest between consults, and stacking them up is not the way to do it. The stress of knowing you've got another meeting in 10 minutes is going to negatively impact your conversions. Okay. Now, let's talk about connection. Attorneys miss opportunities to connect with potential clients. Other than observation, I know because of Legal Consumer Legal Trends report in 2018, they said clients routinely felt 33% of the time they felt urgency, but only 15% of attorneys perceived client urgency as part of the experience. And you can see how it goes. Frustration, how the clients felt versus how the attorneys felt. We got a little Q&A here. I will get please save your questions for the end. I will talk about the Zoom consult versus the in-person. Okay. So we'll come back to that. This tells you there's a stark difference in what the attorneys are perceiving as important or occurring with the client and what the client's actually experiencing. Right? Now, why does this happen? Attorneys miss this because they aren't intentional about engaging and connecting. Sometimes people come to you with a problem that you've seen every day the last 5 years. Old hat to you, even if it's brand new to them. The temptation is to treat it the way an ER doctor has to treat a bullet wound. They have to get to work and detach emotionally. But people need to feel connection with you, meaning they want more than confidence. They want to feel like the attorney cares. When attorneys attack the problem right away and blow past empathy, they appear like an emotional robot. If I have to choose between two attorneys who appear equally competent, I'm going for one who's a little more human. Okay. Empathy matters. Wanting to help people isn't empathy. It's just wanting to help. Your potential clients, by and large, need to feel the difference. I've seen people call attorneys, open the call with having lost a loved one, a child was taken, some terrible situations going on. They're losing their business. And the attorney jumps right to the fact of the case. No pause, no empathy. It's ER doctor syndrome. They've got to separate themselves from the emotion because it'd be exhausting to be so engaged. I get it. But prospects need to feel the connection. Here's a quick example. Potential client calls in and says, I just had this is an immigration issue. Someone taken by INF. The attorney goes to, when did it happen and in what jurisdiction? Now, a lot of times you feel really strong, like, hey, I can solve this problem. I can get after it. But what if it went like this? And I just had my son taken by INS. What if the attorney said, God, I'm so sorry. That must be really hard for you. Yes, you're going to open yourself to a lot of emotion, but it's what has to happen. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip my story about a heart incident and get to some of the other really important material here. You can't get impatient with potential clients. Okay. They don't know what you know. They don't know how to hire an attorney. Usually you can't get frustrated with them because they're going to feel it if you do. And it'll cost you business. You're the only attorney they're talking to today, 99% of the time, even if you talk to 10 people just like them. I've seen attorneys get upset when the potential client says, I need, or I heard, or I read somewhere else. Someone said, I saw a YouTube video. In some areas of the law, people are going to try to DIY it, right? Happens all the time. The thing to not do is get frustrated and check out or argue with them. It's fitting as their attorney to argue for them. But when they're trying to find out if you can help them, it's not the time to tell them they're an idiot or they're wrong. And very often, even if you're not saying you're an idiot, your tone says you're an idiot. I've got these degrees behind me. I've been doing this for a long time. How dare you quote suits in here? It breaks connection, right? Simply spend time connecting and don't get a defensive if they've done a little homework, even if it comes from Law and Order. All right. This is a big one. See this all the time. Someone comes to an attorney with a problem. The attorney then drops into legal terms, which the other person has zero awareness of. I remember my brother was in law school and I was in high school. He kept talking about torts. And I was thinking about the flourless chocolate cake at the little market down the street. No clue what you're talking about. We've actually encouraged intake specialists to stop saying, what sort of matter is this? Because no one outside of the legal world uses matter in that context. So we have intake specialists say, tell me what's going on. Can you share with me, why'd you call? Because that's how people talk and think. Attorneys also like to talk about historical cases and all the ways a case could play out, which add the ambiguity to for your potential client. And ambiguity is the last thing they want when they come to you. They get confused and they have no idea what to do with the mini primer you've just given them on it, state law, torts, or the justice system. Analysis slows the brain down. Potential clients begin to work through all the information you've given them, and they're trying to determine where in my mental closet do I put this. It actually impedes the process of winning a lot of clients. Not all of them, not under all circumstances, but I want you to look at what Daniel Kahneman came up with in his research on how people think. He puts it into two categories: fast, which is intuitive, gut-based, and emotional, and slow, which is deliberate, logical, based on process. Attorneys, when they educate, push people into slow thinking, leading meetings to end with, "Thanks for all that information." How do I know? I've got an attorney who has only non-attorneys running consults. They actually convert at a higher rate than the attorneys did. They tell stories, they ask questions, they listen, and they're winning new clients just at an incredible clip. They don't educate because it'd be illegal to do so. Potential clients aren't necessarily looking to be wowed by your legal knowledge, at least not right away. Many just want to be understood. I've said it before. I worked for an immigration firm, and the intake team would say, "Do you want to set up a time to meet with the attorney?" This was after they'd gotten some basic information. And routinely people would say, "You haven't heard my story yet." They needed to be heard, and this is telling. Okay. Fourth big mistake. I'm going to guess assumptions people make keep a lot of you in business, especially when it comes to contracts. That and the fact that no one reads it. But assumptions wreck communication, especially in a consult. Most people assume they know what the other person wants or is looking for. Why else would they be with an attorney, you think? Assumptions. Here's a quick story on one. One of my clients was a criminal defense attorney. He's meeting with a potential client. The guy's a little bit older. He's in dirty clothes. He works what's called a yard job. So his hands are dirty. He's making minimum wage, maybe a little bit older. He'd been in prison for 15 years. Okay. So my client starts thinking, this guy doesn't have the money. It's going to be a $50,000 defense. He's thinking, there's no way. I can't help this guy. Why am I here? And I want you to think, when you start thinking that, you're not engaged. Somewhere along the line, the potential client that, I tell you what, man, I got $350,000 in the bank. I'll pay you $100,000 if you can guarantee I won't go back to prison. Now, my client didn't make that guarantee, didn't take the case, said, "Hey, I can't make that guarantee." But it was a wake-up call to him that he was making an assumption. In this case, it was on money, which we'll deal with later. But he made a big assumption that really got in the way. And for a lot of us, we're running around with assumptions all the time. Most attorneys don't know what a potential client wants. And I know you're saying, why are they in front of me? They clearly know. And that's okay, but I just want you to ask some questions. It's easy to assume that a potential client wants an attorney with your background, your experience, your clerkship. That is one type of assumption. There's another type of assumption when you assume the potential client gets what's at stake and is fully motivated to take the action necessary to deal with it. How often have you been in a consult and thought, this person's in a lot of trouble? And that they had to take action right now, but they didn't. Like, they didn't get it. They didn't even seem to be as motivated as you were to solve the problem. Something didn't click. You and they missed each other. There was a breakdown. And you assumed that they got what was at stake for them, what risks they were taking. You can call it pattern recognition, experience, or something else. You can see in your head, like a movie, the consequence that they don't take action. But if they don't discuss it with you for them, it likely doesn't exist. Okay? They have to talk about it out loud with you. Sometimes that's what's needed for their risks to become real to them. It's a mistaken belief that we don't have to discuss everything. And I'm just giving you a couple rules here. Take nothing for granted and ask about everything, because your competition won't. It also goes the other way. You assume that you get what's at stake for them, and you rush past something that they need you to hear and that you need to hear. Maybe you don't ask the questions you know that you need to, because you assume you know what they want: an attorney, from the consult, why this case matters, what's on the line, how they feel about money, how much they have. All of those things are important for us to dig into. Okay. As a result, if you don't dig into that, you miss something that's really important, some small tell, a key detail, all because of assumptions. Next big mistake before we move on to structures, believing that it's all about money. Okay. I haven't seen It's All About the Benjamins, but it seemed like a great fit for this slide. You probably agree that our lives are results of our beliefs. All of you probably believe that hard work pays off and education is important because of the line of work you've chosen and where you are in your career. I'd put money on that because of the choices you made, this legal career and the work it takes to get here and more. Routinely, when I talk to attorneys, and I've said this before, they say things like, well, they're not qualified because they can't afford me, or they don't have the money, or my price is too high, or they wanted something cheaper. And that's what they think about. But when attorneys believe this, it leads to certain behaviors. Maybe they check out and they don't really listen. If you're in a relationship with somebody, you know when they're not listening. And we all know we've been guilty of it when dealing with a potential client. Maybe we prematurely offer payment plans because we believe they don't have the money. Maybe we discount and now we're doing rate work at a lower rate than really worth. They missed opportunities to move things forward. Yes, you've been burned when people push back on your fees. I get it. I've been there. I sell professional services for a living. But what if you believed that people had the money and were simply looking for the justification to pay you, that they wanted to trust you enough to pay you? Everyone who comes to you, by and large, has multiple streaming services, an iPhone or an Android, and those things, like when we realize what they really cost, it's pretty staggering. And they've probably got a pretty big flat screen TV, and a lot of them eat out regularly. Not all of your clients all the time, but it's there. People have money, and they've just got to decide how to spend it. If you believe this, how would you behave differently in consults? So a few rules. Don't assume that they can't afford you. Don't prematurely offer payment plans, and don't assume too soon that they need a payment plan. I see another little red box up there on the Q&A. Please hold that because I'll lose my train of thought. I won't be able to get back into this. Put a pin in that and we'll come back to it. I'm not saying everyone has the money. Trust me, I'm not saying that. But too often we assume they don't have the money. I'm not saying spend time with people who aren't qualified. Some aren't. I'm not saying to never offer payment plans or discounts. I am saying that you probably don't want to be in the business of chasing fees, and you can avoid it at times if we have a different structure, which I'll walk you through. When we've adjusted behavior regarding money, we've seen some pretty stunning results. So here's some of the mistakes. Avoid spending time in your consult on the wrong things or not giving yourself enough time. If your consult is I've seen as short as 15 or 20 minutes, unless you're just knocking them down because you've got a factory, I think you need a minimum of 30. Sometimes it's 45 or more. I see people not really put any emphasis on building connection. They overeducate, they assume, and they really believe it's all about money. All right. Want you to think about this equation. Confusing jargon from an attorney when the people you're talking to aren't attorneys. Not building a relationship equals they're going to default to what they can understand, which is your price. You appear expensive because they don't understand what you're talking about. They don't have a relationship with you. Okay. You probably want more information than what not to do. So let's talk about the consult itself. A structure is needed. And this is the framework that I advocate and I've been working with people on. And I want to give you some of this. Before I do, here's what I see most attorneys do in their consult. Don't get defensive if this is you. They welcome the person. They talk about their background. Maybe they talk about their personal or their firm's capabilities. They ask some questions about the case. There's a deep dive on the law that would cause Black to be confused. Like he's like, his book is sitting on your shelf and it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. There are recommendations that are multiple things that cause the person to start trying to figure out how to handle all the options in front of them. Maybe there are options on how to pay, and there's, hey, if you want to work with me, they send a link or an agreement. What's missing? Well, a lot of times you don't actually know what they're looking for. You're going to say, well, they're here with me, so I know what they're looking for. But look, I go to an ice cream shop. It doesn't mean I want vanilla. If you don't slow down to find out what's important to a potential client, how do you connect with them on it? Second, they don't know where the consult is going. Okay. When do you talk money? How's this going to work? When do they get to ask questions? What are their options? How do they hire an attorney? Do you ask them questions or they ask questions? They don't know the process. So when they're asking these questions because they don't know, they're not actually present with you. The next thing is we don't find out what's at stake for them. I'll get into this more in a minute, and I've touched on it already, but most attorneys assume both sides know we're on the same page. Assumptions don't work in my marriage, and we've been married 14 years. So how does that end? Like I said, that's a lot of money. Think about it. Can I call you back? Thanks for this information. You're really smart or good at what you do. Okay. If I had an attorney for every time a dollar for every time a lawyer says my fees are high or my favorite, the prospects just aren't qualified. Some, not all, but some of the problems with this approach to intakes and consult is this semi-rational approach. And the potential client gives what is to them a rational response. A lot of money, or you're really smart because I have no clue what you're talking about. They're not solving a math problem. That's a different part of the brain. When they come to you, they're in an emotional state. If you're dealing with individuals, it may be that they're bereaved, they're about to end a marriage, they're fighting for their kids, they're scared financially, they've been threatened. It could be a dispute over assets, and they're in fight or flight mode. Maybe they're worried about being able to stay in the US. They're facing the loss of a license or the shame of a DUI. If you're dealing with businesses, there's fear over being taken advantage of, losing a lot of money, being stabbed in the back, being hung out to dry. Choosing to work with you is not a rational decision. People buy emotionally, even when it comes to hiring an attorney. This is a Cadillac, and General Motors spends a lot of money figuring out what causes people to spend the kind of money to buy a Cadillac. They sell you on style and image. Yes, they come with great engines, but that's not what they're selling. They know what motivates people to spend money. You have to accept that people make the decision of hiring you emotionally. Even if you share your bona fides, what you're really trying to do is inspire in them a feeling of confidence and safety with you. We got to make peace with that. You aren't selling filing a motion or a brief, reviewing contracts. You are selling fix it, make it go away, take care of it. What that really is security, confidence, trust, safety. Okay. Now that we've established it, let's look at this structure. This is the one I work with clients on. It's here for you to use. We spend the first portion of the consult understanding what a potential client is looking for. We then open a loop conversationally, and I'll explain this. And it's designed to get both people on the same page about what decision is going to be made today. This prepares them for that. It's not a surprise. They know what's going to happen and when. We then do something critical. We break apart the case and the compelling issues. We want to know the real problem they have emotionally, distinct from their legal issue. We find out if they're committed to doing something. It doesn't necessarily need to be with you, but are they committed to doing something? When we close the loop for a decision before we talk fees, from there we can discuss clear next steps. Okay? So let's talk about expectations. A lot of attorneys go in, they know a lot about the type of case they're dealing with, but I don't hear them ask potential clients, what's important to you? Is it my experience on these cases? My communication style? My strategy? Keeping you informed? Talking to you about how we work together? Quick hint, most of the time when I talk to people and I visit with attorneys, we find out clients really just want someone to give them solid, clear, regular communication. That's the winner. When you ask what somebody's looking for in an attorney, you do a couple things. You get them considering their criteria. This focuses their brain intently on defining what it is they want. Sometimes they've not even thought about it. Okay. Other times they've just not articulated it. But you help them by asking a question no one else will ask. And then you have a chance to help them define what it is they want if they don't know what it is they're looking for, by offering suggestions of what they should look for. In effect, you load the dice. Okay. Assuming you're ethical and decent, this is in their best interest. Your job early on is to find out as quickly as possible what they want in an attorney from the consult. Now, I want you to think about how that would change your consult. How would it change what you talked about if you knew something was really like the 2 or 3 criteria that are most important to them? So it might sound like, what are you looking for in an attorney? Or what are you looking for in a firm? There's a quick note. When you start doing this, most people won't answer the question. They'll just start telling you about their problem. Your job is to redirect them and ask, hey, I appreciate that. We're going to get into all of that. But what's most important to you in an attorney? Is it my experience? Is it my communication? Is it our strategy? how we handle your case. Once you direct attention to their choices, they'll give you better answers. That'll help you guide the consult to what they care about. Then I want you to ask the same question. What makes this a good consult for you? I was working with a firm yesterday and they sell to other businesses and they started to ask, hey, what's important? What makes a good relationship for you? And they said, you know what? No one's ever asked us that. They just jump right in. You follow the same process. This right here will make a significant difference in your consults. The second thing you do is you open a loop conversationally. People want to know where are we going. The brain needs resolution. By telling people where they're going and what to expect, they're more likely to work with you later because you helped set the expectation and you met the expectation. We've all had service providers who said they were going to do something and they didn't do it. We are looking to say, can I trust you? Did you do this thing? It works at a subconscious level. But people want to know, where are we going? What will happen? When we do this, we tell them what's going to happen. We lower their tension and their caloric burn mentally. Because otherwise they're asking questions. Where is this going to go? They have a hard time being in the moment. They're able to be present with you. So it makes you more comfortable with harder conversations, whether the material is personal or talking about fees. And then we talk to them about what decision they're going to make at the end of the consult. That makes resolving the meeting much easier than you saying, hey, go talk to Norma out in the hall. She'll give you some paperwork to sign. It's easier to ask for business ahead of time if you've told someone that you're going to do it. So I have my client say something like, what? Where did I put it? I lost it. Sorry, guys. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions and then I'm going to tell you if I can help. And I'm going to ask if you want my help. That's it. I'm going to tell you if I can help and I'm going to ask if you want my help. That's all we ask. We close the loop by revisiting that decision later after we told them we'd come back to it. But now let's look at the matter. We talked about assumption. You got to break apart the case facts from how it impacts the person we're talking to, even in business law. You're looking for a personal element or the consequences. The facts of the case are rarely why they'll take action. It's how it impacts them and how they feel about it. It has to be dealt with, discussed out loud. You've heard the saying, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, make it sound. I don't know. But if someone has an issue and we don't talk about it, it might as well not exist. We simply assume we're on the same page. And attorneys routinely are guilty of making that assumption and not talking about how this affects someone emotionally. How does this tie into qualification? The attorney you want to know, do they qualify for my help? Is this a fit? Do I want this case? You have so many leads you can pick and choose. That's great. You're looking for, can I take the case and do I want it? But for people to take real action, hiring you, it comes down to finding their personal motivation. You can't assume you have it. The rainmaker in you needs to know, is there a compelling reason for them to take action? Do we both know, and are we on the same page about what's at stake? Do they want my help? And are they committed to doing something other than watching Judge Judy and thinking they can take this to her? Okay? They've got to be committed to solving it. I routinely hear attorneys say, they didn't seem to have the money and they complained about our fees. And then they went down the street and hired someone who is not cheaper. That's telling. You've got to help people connect with their reason to take action. And whether you like it or not, this graph helps us understand how people make decisions, especially when it comes to money. 95% of decision-making is between the reptilian and the emotional brain. It's very emotionally driven. Fear, safety, protection. The logical brain makes about 5% of decisions. For the CFOs and the actuaries hang out. I know you see people exploit this and it makes you want to throw up. I feel the same way. But people go to therapists all the time and they need help. And a therapist has to help someone find their motivation to fix it. It's called motivational interviewing and they employ cognitive behavioral therapy. And a therapist helps people move from surface issues to what they've tried, to how they're impacted, to how they feel. Because feelings drive action. This motivates taking positive action. You have to lean into helping people connect with their motives to take the action that's in their best interest. What's at stake? How often do doctors tell people, change your diet, you got to take the meds, and people don't? If they don't connect with what's at stake emotionally, no one's going to change. So to do this, you're going to move from educating to facilitating discovery. Because if you remember nothing else today, it's that the discovery of your client is more important, more powerful than your points. So you've got to ask questions that cause the light bulb in their heads to go off. Let's pretend you're in a market where your competition is less than stellar. Okay. You don't want to bag on a competitor because then you look bad. Client of mine did both criminal and immigration law. He was talking to a former client who didn't want to pay his fee on dealing with the matter. The client had found someone cheaper who dealt with only one side of it. My client, the attorney, knew that the matter was both immigration and criminally related. So we asked a few questions about how the other attorney was going to handle the criminal portion of it. The other attorney didn't handle criminal, only immigration. The client quickly realized what was at stake and gladly paid my client's fees. If the PNC discovers it, a potential new client, it's compelling. Here's what happens when you facilitate discovery. You don't even have to tell them how great you are. They see it, they feel it because of the questions that you ask. They may actually say, can you help me? Or how do we solve this? There's no talking about your firm or your experience or blowing their mind with strategy. There's a time to do that. And there's a time to present how you'll help them, but it's more important that they connect with their compelling issue and experience your expertise by what you ask. Let's give you a way to get your arms around this. You're going to a consult. You've got some information from your intake team. I'd like you to write out the questions you want to know about the case. And then I want you to guess how you think they are impacted by it, which will probably make you uncomfortable because it involves a lot of feelings. I don't love doing it either. What you then need to do in that third box is put together the questions that validate what you believe is at stake, that you'll ask and verify. You then might write down what you think they need to know about their situation. You can even put down some potential ramifications and then start to ask yourself, how do I think these impact the person, so that you can ask questions to see how they feel about it. I tell you what, attorneys regularly tell me that doing this makes their job so much easier in the consult. You begin asking questions so they discover. You show, you don't tell. This will lead to less telling and more pulling out. Some of the most potent questions are some like, can you live with this? Instead of, here's what happens if you don't do it. Maybe it's, how will this affect you financially versus this is going to cost you this much money, right? Next, what you wanted to know, are they committed to solving the problem? It doesn't have to be you, but you want to know if this is something they're actually going to take action on. And you know what we haven't discussed yet? Money. Why? There's no point in talking about money if they're not committed to solving it. So we talked about opening a loop when we laid out the consult structure. We want to close the loop. Here's what most people do to end a consult. They talk about the money. They say, here's some links to fill out. Here's some paperwork. Let me know what you want to do. It costs X. Nope. Here's what I want you to find out. Do they want to move forward? Not, call if you want help. I'm here if you need me. I'll send over the paperwork. All I want you to start asking is, do you want my help? And this, one of my clients, he's an estate attorney, says, these are magic words. And I want you to do this before you talk money. If you're free, but they don't want your help, who cares? You might be $1 million an hour, but if you're the best in the world, they might find the money to pay you. Okay. So let's talk about discussing fees. People can be weird about money. We all have different messages we receive about money. So you need a process for both parties that makes it easy. Sometimes we can use a real short version. Sometimes we can use a longer version. This can be a lot about managing your own psychology. But some basic mental tools will help you. So one of the things to ask is, what do you think is a lot of money? If you think $10,000 is a lot of money, but your average case is 15 to 20, as soon as someone says to you, that's expensive, you internally agree with them. You need to think through, what are some of the messages that you absorbed as a child around money? I grew up in the Deep South, and I was told, you don't talk about it. You don't ask how much things cost. So now when I have to talk to people about money, I feel a little awkward. Argued with my father and grandfather and trying to get paid. I want you to think about what beliefs you and other people have about money. Here are a few principles. Where you can, you want to anchor on numbers higher than your fees in the consult before you get to your fees. What this does is this puts in the potential client's mind a number that's different than your fees. Sometimes the first number that's ever discussed is your fee. And so it feels isolated and it looks bigger than it really is. So what I work with people on is talking about if we're dealing with an estate, the size of the asset, because it starts to anchor and make the fees. It diminishes the fee size in the mind of the potential client. But I want to anchor where we can. We also want to avoid preemptively offering payment plans, right? So we worked with a client and we got to the bottom. You can see we said, how do you want to handle fees? And we told them what it would be. And the person just said, do you take cash, and pulled out a stack? I think it was like, they pulled out a stack of hundreds. It was $6,000 in cash. So one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to have these principles about using silence and not believing it's all about money. Okay. Now get agreement before you push off the discussion about money. You want to wrap things up then and there in the consult. People feel better about decisions they've made than ones they're going to make. It's a way to manage this. Now, let's move from there. If they decide to work with you, you move to setting up next steps, paperwork where you'll need documents. Now, some of you deal with decision making. If you're dealing with a potential client who is making the decision, this is usually pretty straightforward. But if you're in business law or you're dealing with someone who's representing the potential client or you're selling to a large organization, you're going to need a process. If you're dealing with a personal family matter or the potential client's not in the consult, you need to do three things. You need to find out who's involved, what their criteria is, and their timeline. Here's how I ask who's involved. I ask who else cares about this. That usually gets me to somebody else. For their criteria, I ask, what are you looking for in a firm, which we talked about at the beginning, which helps you determine where to go in the consult. And with the timeline, I'll say, hey, when do you want to have your attorney wrapped up? Okay. That I'm not asking about the decision. I'm asking the outcome of the decision, which is what they really care about. So this is the master process. We find out of expectations. We open a loop for decision. We talk case issues to compelling issues to finding out if they're committed. We then close a loop and talk money. In some instances, we have to get into decision making where it's a little more complex. So we can deal with that in Q&A. I want to be respectful of our time, and there are a few more tools that we can maybe get into. I will get into anchoring in a minute. I appreciate somebody told me that I should see all about the Benjamins, but we're running out of time. So there are a handful of topics on people skills that I don't know that we've really got time in this one to cover, and that's on me. And I apologize to all the viewers now and those in the future. Nina, you and I can work out how we get that to them. But we're coming to the top of the hour, and so what I recommend is that we move to Q&A, and we can jump into some of this. Nina, at this point, I'm going to turn it back to you and say we can go from there.
That sounds great. Thanks, Adam. We can definitely move into the Q&A. I'm just going to stop your sharing for a moment. And then if we do have time at the end, we can either send you all those resources for the toolkit that I know Adam had at the end of his presentation, or if you wanted to go through it, we can as well. We'll just kind of play that by ear. But if you do have any questions for Adam, I know we already have quite a few, but if you do want to submit them, you can feel free to do so by clicking that Q&A button at the control panel at the bottom of your screen and submitting them. We can go ahead and dive right in. So I know the first question that we got was, what is your opinion about the impact of a Zoom consultation versus an in-person consultation?
At the end of the day, each of you are running your own practice, and you've got to make decisions for what works best for you. I'd like you to be in person where you can, because you can identify physical tells, you can see body language, you can engage a little bit more. But you can still do a lot through Zoom. Now, I've worked with organizations and firms where they're on Zoom and the other person doesn't turn on. So we just say, can you turn on your screen? There's a lot that you guys we get in life simply by asking. And I prefer Zoom to the phone, but I'm okay with just being on the phone as well. What happens is the medium is going to determine what sense you lean on. So if you're on the phone, you've really got to listen. You've got to listen anyway, but you don't have your eyes to guide you. So I know a lot of you are probably in a place now where a lot more of your consults are being done over Zoom. Uh, One of the things that makes that really important is setting expectations for how it needs to be run. Your intake team can do this. You can do this the way you set up email or text, but they need to allot a certain amount of time. Here's what's going to occur. They need to show up. They also need to not be distracted. I know some people take Zoom calls while they're driving. I'm amazed that we don't have more fatalities because of that. But I would really set the expectation. I think you can still be as effective. My guess, if I had to put money on it, is in person, you will always convert more.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Adam. Our next question was, can you re-explain the concept of anchoring?
Yes. So this is a tool used in psychology and in negotiation. But let's talk about negotiations. And if Nina and I are negotiating over something, you've heard a lot about, there are all sorts of thoughts, but one of the, who this person goes first, they lose. What I want to do with Nina is, let's pretend we're negotiating over what I want to be a $500,000 deal. But I know, hey, with Nina, I've got to kind of move her off of her original position. So I will throw down an anchor of a much larger number. In this case, I might say, hey, Nina, this is going to be $900,000. And I know Nina's going to work me down, but I want to get to 500,000, because if she was going to start at 100 and I threw in an anchor of 900, it automatically moves her off. So here's a great example of this. When asking people how many countries they believe there were in the world, it was some research done, and you took a large sample of people. They would ask people before that, what are the last two digits of your social security number? The higher the last two digits, the more countries they believed there were in the world, because they anchored on a higher number. So let's just pretend, I don't know what your fees are, whoever asked this, maybe it's your average case size is 10 grand. Depending on the type of case, what I'm looking for at some point is to have a conversation about numbers and money that are significantly greater than your fees. Maybe it's lost earnings, maybe it's the value of the assets, maybe it's what's at stake. Because what happens is, when that number is 3 to 5 times greater than your fees look, sound, and feel a lot more reasonable. Now, what will happen is, this is not a silver bullet in every consult, but you can start to see it statistically bear out over a large number. One of the places we see this is restaurants who want to raise money. Sometimes, not all of them, when they want to raise prices, they will have at the top left corner, the first thing you see, one of the most expensive things on the menu, because it anchors you on a new number, and every other price can be raised after that, because you're going to have less objection to it. So we can deal with it somewhere else.
Awesome.
Nina, do you want me to read these, or do you want to read them? I'm happy either way.
I was thinking maybe we would take like 2 more questions,
Okay.
and then we can circle back if you'd like to share the rest of your toolkit, if people have time
Okay,
to
sure.
stay.
Call.
So the next one that really relates to what you were just talking about, does offering a no charge consultation versus charging maybe signal weakness on talking money later? What's your opinion on that?
I don't have a strong opinion. I think that's mostly in your head. Here's what I think a lot of people are concerned about that. My bigger concern, and this is me, I'm not Moses coming down the mountain with the tablets here, but when you charge for a consult, you feel obligated that you've got to tell them how to solve the problem. But the truth is, telling them how to solve the problem is something they can't do without hiring you. I think it's fine to offer no charge consult depending on where you are in your career. Um, in fact, what you probably want to do is run as many consults as possible, but simply have the people vetted beforehand through intake, the way you market, and how you bring those in. Because eventually, as you and your firm grow, you're going to have other people running those consults. And then you're only taking the ones that are most qualified. I don't think it signals weakness at all. For a lot of you, you want as many consults as you can get because it's batting practice and you're trying to improve your skill set in this area.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight. Our last question before we maybe circle back to that toolkit is, can you provide a few examples of successful techniques or maybe things to say if a client introduces objections or resistance during a consultation?
This is a good one. And here's what I would suggest, because I want to come back. There's going to be a rapport one we can address in the toolkit. I don't look at objections as a big issue. If Nina and I are discussing something and she brings up an objection, what I really want to do is understand what she's thinking and why she feels that way. So it keeps me from being combative. But if Nina says now's a bad time, I think, well, tell me why you think that. Tell me what you're feeling there. And when she starts to have a conversation, it actually shifts. So that's one thing. Is I just don't see them as some great challenge to overcome. The second thing is that if something is happening repeatedly in your consult, you're creating that circumstance through how you set the consult up. So when some of my work, I tell people, I don't do this, I'm bad at this is what it's going to cost. And so I've tried to effectively just take these things off the board that I'm not going to deal with or handle later. And we could get into more specifics of that if you want to ask another question. Frankly, I love the Q&A. But I think that's something we can do. In the toolkit, I can talk about rapport strategies, common pitfalls. I kind of went over common pitfalls. I'll give one, if Nina, if it's okay, I'd like to get a thought on the digital age. And so on the digital age, you don't really have a choice about understanding digital. I think you all have to really start to dial in who the right client is for you in your practice area. And you're really intelligent. You need to decide, do I hire somebody who helps me learn that, where you might end up lighting a lot of money on fire, because there are people who are good at it and there are people who aren't. But the more that you can understand about how this their potential client works, the better you can craft an experience for them to come into your world. I think AI is going to help with this a lot. I think you need to be able to have the right types of forms to get filled out, so that when they get to you, they're sort of filtered. And I've got a client now. Their firm takes inbound, outbound, everything. They do 10,000 phone calls a month. They do 40,000 texts a month. So that just tells you there's this massive shift, and it's a place we probably all want to be going. I'll talk about rapport in a second, and I'll also kind of get into specific needs, assuming you know the case, and we'll go from there. That would sound good. Nina, do you want me to I could run through some things for another 5 or 7 minutes if that works.
Yeah, I think right now, if you want to answer more questions, of course, please feel free to. I know there's a few, but I think it'd be really helpful if you ran through your toolkit. I think it's really great.
All right. I'll try not to put anybody to sleep. Okay. A few things that are going to sound incredibly elementary. Don't get mad at me. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you what's true. One of the things that will help with the way you run consults is pace. So when talking to a potential client, the slower you are is generally the better. When I coach people, we work on their pace a lot because they're typically too fast. Slower indicates more confidence and expertise. You lean in when someone speaks slower. It also enables the other person time to grasp what you're saying. If they're stressed and you slow down, they will actually start to slow down because they're going to mirror you if they feel connected. Pitch lower is typically better than higher. I'm not saying the women have to sound like men, but we talk from the back of our throat when we're nervous. We talk from our gut or our chest when we're relaxed and comfortable. And that's a deeper pitch. The one we all think about who has the best pitch in the world is Morgan Freeman. It indicates relaxed, comfortable, and trustworthy. Okay. Tone is, you want to emphasize warmth. You don't want to emphasize RoboCop of attorneys. You don't need to be cheesy. You don't need to be salesy. You don't need to be overly happy, but warm. The way you'd greet a friend. All three of these things are subconscious indicators to the other person that they can trust you and that you're a safe person to talk to. and you need people to share things with you long before you get into depositions. Okay. Listening is going to be one of the keys. And you're thinking, I showed up and spent an hour and 20 minutes to hear this guy tell me to listen. The consult is a time to listen. As I mentioned, people trust you based on how much you know about them. Okay. So doctors see malpractice suits in an inverse correlation to how much time they spend listening or they spend with the patient. Meaning, the more time they spend listening, the less likely they are to get sued. You want to be focused on talking max 40% of the consult. I encourage clients to be closer to 25 to 30% of the time. People need to be heard, especially early on. At this point, we've not talked about where you grew up. We've not talked about things you guys have in common. We've talked about how you sound and how much time you spend listening. Okay. Now, this is one of the things that you can practice on friends and family. You can start at a party, whatever you've got going on this weekend. One of the ways people comfort each other is to mirror body language, pace, pitch, tone, even vocabulary. We see it in the animal kingdom where primates, if one is stressed, the other one will mirror their posture and body language. If you want to bond with people more quickly, even potential clients, you just mirror. And a great book on this is written by a guy named Chris Voss. He was a lead hostage negotiator for the FBI, and he talks about isopraxism, it's just imitation. But we copy each other to comfort each other, and you'll see couples who've been together a long time, they even start to look like each other. But you can actually imitate their actual words. So if Nina's talking to me and she says, it's been a really long day, I would just repeat the last few words. I said, really long day? As if I'm saying, help me understand. What will happen is Nina has actually heard me use her language. So I sound like her, and she's going to actually elaborate. And now when she's elaborating, she's sharing more with me, making her feel closer. So this is going to happen on a subconscious level. And here's an example. Potential client might say, this video is going to cost them time. And you as the attorney might say, cost you time. And they say, yeah. And they will elaborate. And they'll say, 4 more weeks for this project. If you ask about that, they say, yeah. And it's costing us $100K per week. That $100K per week starts to become your anchor for those of you asking. Okay. So use this on friends and family. Just listen, really dial in, and repeat back 2 to 3 words they said and watch what happens. Okay. Another tool Chris Voss taught, and I'd been using for a while, but he put a name on it and probably trademarked it, is called labeling. The labeling forces you to listen. And for many of you who want to rush to solve the problem, this will actually allow you to connect and build more trust. So it's preceded with words such as it sounds like, or it looks like, or I get to sense that. And what you're simply going to be doing is labeling the emotion or the feeling or the state that they're in. So you're going to do this when you notice strong emotion. You see that the person's fearful, stressed, anxious, or worried, or you realize there's probably more information that has bigger implications behind what they're saying. Okay. They might say, I can't believe this. Labeling would say, it sounds like you're really hurt, right? That's the way you're going to connect and they're going to feel understood. Okay. Somebody might say, I can't believe you do that. It sounds like you were caught off guard, right? That you just start labeling. Here's what I see. Here's what I'm hearing. Something you're already feeling. Just think about Monopoly. You don't pass go, right? Don't pass go without labeling. All right. I talked a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy and motivational interviewing. So somebody asked a question about the issues that potential clients have. I'm going to pull up the question specifically if I can figure this out. Specific needs. So you typically are going to start most consults with, tell me what's going on. And they're going to give you some issues. What I want you to do is to identify a problem that is ancillary to what you solve. Okay. In family law, it might be guardianship, it might be a divorce. All I want you to do, and just practice this on friends and family, is say, tell me more about that. People will always open up and give you more information. Now, your job as the attorney is to kind of be a detective and figure out, where do I need to go with this? I'm not trying to make it sound esoteric. You'll know, right? If it's a divorce case, you're looking for certain issues. If it's a criminal case, you're looking for certain issues. If it's immigration, you're looking for certain issues. But then what I do is I'm going through a structure. I'm looking for specifics. Tell me about it. I'm getting specifics. I want to know time frame. I want to know what they've tried. I want to know if that worked. I want to know how it affected them. That's anchoring. I want to know about their feelings, and I'll probably summarize. So I'll say, Nina, tell me more about that. She'll give me some information. I might ask her, hey, what do you mean by this? Because people will start to always define things more clearly when you ask what they mean. And then I might say, when did this occur? How long has it been going on? I'll ask about alternatives. What have you tried? And then I want to know how it affected you, right? I want to know that. I might ask, how's it affected you financially? You're dealing with an estate issue. Some of you are in estate law. No one has to do anything right now unless they're like, that they're up against it. We want to start to anchor on that. Then I want to know how it's impacted you, how you feel about it personally. And then I might say, well, I might summarize and say, this is what I'm hearing. I come back and label it. So this is a tool that you're going to be with someone this weekend. If they're going to tell you something, I just want you to ask questions. They tell me more about that. What do you mean? You'll be astounded at how easy conversations go. Now, look, I just given you a few. I'm in Texas. Everywhere you go in Texas, Thomas J. Henry is killing it with billboard spend, radio, television. If you're not the leader in your market, if you're not the name brand in your practice area, in your market, you have to be able to win over new clients. People's skills combined with a good structure will help you get past the hesitation to work with you. They'll help you differentiate. And it'll help clients who aren't comfortable with a stranger or the law connect and bond with you. So that's kind of it. I mean, we could get into some deeper things. I don't have them in the presentation, but these are the things that I want you to take, start processing and work with. So you all have been great. We've talked about what to avoid. We've given you a structure, and we've given you some basic people and communication skills. These are things that practice on coworkers, practice on family members and friends. Here's my information if you've got questions. And I'm so grateful to have been with you guys today. So Nina, you've been a wonderful hostess, and it's been a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adam. And thank you all for joining and spending a little extra time with us today. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for another Justia webinar. As I mentioned at the top of the presentation, Adam gave you some great tips to help you convert your leads into cases. And we have a great tool to help you get those leads that you're looking for. So just a reminder about Justia premium placements. These placements through the Justia Lawyer Directory allow for you to be seen above the competition, whether it's a fixed #1 placement with our Justia Platinum placements, or just ranking highly above the organic directory profiles with a Justia Gold placement. We're here to help you get in front of people who are looking for a lawyer now. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to marketing.justia.com and have a great rest of your day. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.